we've talked a little bit about backgrounds. I'm a civil engineer. I design infrastructure. I'm a fake civil engineer. I teach students how to design infrastructure. And so this is a figure that I cut and pasted from a paper that's about 15 years old. And basically, in this one figure, I sort of sum up what I think most people think about when it comes to antibiotic use, antibiotic resistance, and antibiotic stewardship. The main driver of all of this, and it was actually said in one of the talks earlier today, is antibiotic use. Antibiotic use leads to antibiotic resistance. This is horribly troublesome from the perspective of even if we could magically impose our will upon the world and use antibiotics in only the most optimal way, resistance is still perhaps inevitable. That's troublesome, at least to me. As neither a physician or a veterinarian, just somebody who might want to use antibiotics someday. So, again, I'm a teacher, so I tend to distill things down to first principles, and I teach a science class to non-scientists, which is a lot of fun. And I teach them what the scientific method is, which is a way of gaining knowledge. And of course it's imperfect, and of course our understanding of that knowledge changes over time. And my students often come in and say, when I ask them what's the opposite of science, and they say religion, and that's completely false. The opposite of science is a word invented by Stephen Colbert, which is truthiness. Okay, which is the quality of, or seeming to be true, but not necessarily true. And I want a message is, and this includes towards me, I want you to think about, is this really true? What is our evidence for this? And I can think of a number of ways in which it's not true that are discussed all the time when it comes to antibiotic stewardship, resistance, and the One Health approach. And I'm not going to outline those because I don't feel like I should criticize people publicly. I will tell you the big one is, and this has been my experience over the last 15 years, looking at antimicrobial resistance in the environment, is most people, and this has changed a lot over the last 5 years, say, you're nuts. It's not an environmental problem. Okay. I gave a talk last year at this meeting in Atlanta, and I think it was well received. I was invited back. Did they give you rotten fruit? No, so probably it was well received. It could have been a trap. And I'm probably one of the few people in the world who doesn't point fingers exclusively at animal agriculture as being the cause of antimicrobial resistance. Going back, sorry, I should have come back here. The FDA, I think, came out and said 80% of antimicrobials in the US are used in animal agriculture. How many of you hate that statistic? Raise your hand, please. And we can think of reasons why. There are, what? It's truthiness. Well, that one's more fact, but it's kind of how to lie with facts, right? Okay. So anyway, let's take a look. And so I work in. This is a terrible figure. This figure came to me on the plane, so it's drawn in Excel. But what you have on the x-axis are a bunch of different sources of human sewage sludge, which is, I'm not going to go to individual humans for poo, which is what I study, and then some swine poo, and then some dairy poo. And this is one specific gene, and it does vary from gene to gene, but the antimicrobial resistance of human sewage sludge versus dairy manure versus swine manure are about the same. So, does this have laser pointer? So the one on the far left and the two on the far right. Okay, they're about the same. Now there's some very big differences here. First of all, we can hopefully guess that the majority of human beings discharging their sewage through this wastewater treatment plant are not taking antimicrobials at that time. And the dairy industry, to my knowledge, has always been heavily regulated with respect to antimicrobial use because we do not want antimicrobials showing up in the milk. Okay? So that is very limited antimicrobial use. And then we have the swine farm, and I can tell you specifically that swine manure, they were given antimicrobials like crazy. Perhaps a really great opportunity for antimicrobial stewardship. Okay? But what you see is literally the swine manure has the lowest level of resistance for this specific gene. And dairy manure has the highest level of resistance. Okay? So that's one of the things I'd like to tell you is all poo is bad. And we inevitably send all of our poo to the environment. Okay? And poo is, if you don't think about these things, and I discourage you from doing that, but that's my career, is about half undigested food and about half microorganisms. Every living creature, every animal is a big bacteria factory. We're growing them all the time, and then we send them out to the world. I will tell you that all of the data in the middle is treated sewage sludge, and so you can see that treatment can make things better. Okay, so I guess in my 5 minutes to sum it all up, poo, no matter where it comes from, is a substantial reservoir of antimicrobial resistance. Antibiotic use does not always lead to higher levels of resistance in the fecal material. Okay? So all poo is bad, not just poo from patients or animals taking antimicrobials. If you want to think about antimicrobial stewardship in the environment, this really means better treatment and disposal of fecal material. That's both with human fecal material and animal fecal material. And I'm not saying it's all bad. I can give you cases where it's very good, and I can give you cases where it's very bad in both sectors. Just my final comments. With the One Health approach in Minnesota, I was involved in a lot of those conversations, and there were conclusions like, oh, we should go to the literature and find all this information about antimicrobials in the environment. And the fact is, and we said this at the time, and then we were immediately ignored, most of that information is not available. We don't know much about antimicrobial resistance in the environment. There's maybe only a couple dozen well-known scientists, good scientists who are making progress in this area. There's no consensus amongst us. I can tell you that. We need a lot more people and a lot more money to get this research understood. And I think we can make some really big improvements. As far as what I would tell you now, we need less manure, less human sewage sludge, and more land. The good examples I've seen in agriculture were done in Minnesota, where by law, manure can be applied only for agronomic purposes, for the health of the soil. And when the farmers did that, we saw no evidence of increase in resistance. When there was a small farm, he wasn't regulated because he was so small, he just let the swine manure ooze out into his field, we saw big problems. Okay? And then I would also advocate for more treatment, whether that's animal manure, which is not normally treated, although it's starting to in some cases, but definitely with human sewage sludge. And what we've seen in my research is that high temperature treatment is actually usually the best treatment.